The storm hadn't let up for days. Rain battered the stained-glass windows of St. Augustine's church in relentless waves, the kind that made you believe something ancient was stirring beneath the earth. Detective Allison Harper stood just inside the arched doorway, water pooling at her feet. Her coat was soaked through, curls plastered to her face, and the smell of incense and something far more bitter, blood, maybe, hung in the air like a warning. The altar loomed ahead, but it was the figure to the left that held her gaze. Maria Grayson. Even in death, she looked like she was posing for some perverse rendition of the Pietà. She was draped over the first pew, arms outstretched as though reaching for salvation she hadn't found in time. A white silk dress clung to her frame, stained a deep crimson around the chest. Her eyes were wide open, pupils dilated. The killer hadn't closed them. "Jesus," murmured Mark Ridgeway as he stepped in behind her. Younger, taller, and still trying to prove himself, Mark had a habit of cracking jokes at crime scenes. "Not this time. Is Father McKinnon here?" Harper asked, voice low. Mark scanned the shadows. Called it in himself. Said he found her during morning prayers. Did he touch the body? Says he didn't. Was praying with his eyes closed. When he opened them, he gestured at Maria. This. Harper approached the body, careful not to disturb the wet stone floor. Maria's hands were folded neatly in her lap, a rosary strung through her fingers. It was clean. Too clean. "She didn't die here," Harper said quietly. Mark arched a brow. "You sure? No blood spatter, no drag marks. Whoever did this cleaned up, or brought her in after. Look." She pointed to Maria's heels. One was scuffed, the other looked barely worn. Mark frowned. "Staged?" "Very." From the side door, Father Daniel McKinnon emerged, flanked by an officer. His face was pale, lips tight, the white collar beneath his black shirt stark against his skin. He moved like a man who'd seen too much, stiff, deliberate, his hands shaking just slightly. "Detective Harper," he greeted, voice hoarse. "Father McKinnon. You found the body?" He nodded. "Yes. I came in for morning prayers. She was, like this. Did you know her?" A pause. "Maria Grayson. She was a member of the congregation. Sang in the choir. You too close?" His gaze didn't waver. "I'm close with all my parishioners." Harper took a step forward. "Did she come to you recently?" "Confession, maybe." Another pause. "She did. But you know I can't divulge that." "Right. Sanctity of confession." Harper's tone was dry. "Even in a murder case?" McKinnon's jaw clenched. "Especially then." Mark shifted beside her. "Father, we'll need a list of everyone who attended last night's service." "There was no service," McKinnon said. "Wednesday night is silent prayer." The church was open, but unattended. "Unattended?" Harper echoed. "No staff, no parishioners. Anyone could have walked in." McKinnon gave a grim nod. "Yes." Harper looked back at the body. Maria's skin was cold, lips tinged blue. Rigor had set in. She'd been dead for hours. "We'll need to take the rosary," she said. McKinnon stiffened. "It's sacred." "So is the truth," Harper replied, already signaling the forensic team. As they worked, Harper studied the crucifix above the altar. It loomed, larger than life, Christ's face twisted in agony, his hands nailed wide. But it was something else that caught her eye, just beneath the feet, etched into the base of the wooden cross, almost invisible in the dim light. A word. "Repent." She stepped closer. It wasn't part of the original carving. The edges were fresh. "Mark," she called. He joined her, following her gaze. "That wasn't there last week." "You sure?" I grew up in this church. I'd remember. Harper's eyes narrowed. So the killer left us a message. Behind them, Father McKinnon murmured a prayer under his breath. Harper turned. Father, when did you last see Maria alive? McKinnon hesitated. She came by Monday evening. We spoke briefly. About? He looked away. She was troubled. That's all I can say. That's not enough anymore, Harper said. He met her gaze. Then arrest me. Mark bristled. No one said anything about. Harper raised a hand, silencing him. Not yet. She turned back to Maria's body, the storm outside rattling the windows like a warning drumbeat. Somewhere in this quiet, God-fearing town, someone had broken their silence, and spilled blood on sacred ground. And Harper wasn't leaving until she found out why. The sky above Ashford remained grey for days, like a lid screwed tightly over a town reaching its boiling point. Wind whispered through the tall hedgerows, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and something else, something metallic. It was subtle, almost imagined, but it left the townsfolk unsettled. The air was too still. Too quiet. Detectives Allison Harper and Mark Ridgeway were no longer simply solving a murder, they were unearthing a legacy of secrets buried beneath generations of faith and fear. Maria Grayson's death had been a trigger, but the chain reaction now exposed everything Ashford tried to forget. The old hospital records confirmed what the letters had only hinted at. Years ago, Father Daniel McKinnon had fathered a child, a boy born under a different name in a different town. The birth was never officially registered under Daniel's name, but a handwritten note inside one of the files, tucked inside a folder stamped, confidential, simply read. Ensure no trace connects DM to this. Ensure no trace connects DM to this. The boy's name was Elias Monroe. Mark stared at the name for a long time. Elias. The surname was common enough, but something about it prickled. He checked the regional registry. Elias Monroe had no school records, no medical records past the age of 12. He had vanished. Either he had been taken elsewhere, or someone ensured his life was erased. Allison, meanwhile, reread Maria's diary. The entries became increasingly erratic in the final pages, as though she knew time was running out. She wrote of someone watching her from the church pews even during empty services. She described waking in the night to find her door unlocked. And the most chilling line. He said I reminded him of her. I asked who he meant, and he only smiled. The mother of my sin. It was written the day before her death. Amelia Ross, the church secretary, had been avoiding the detectives for days. When Allison finally cornered her behind the altar room, the woman's face was pale, drawn like wax melting under pressure. You know something, Allison said gently, and keeping it to yourself isn't protecting anyone anymore. Amelia looked at the stained glass window above her, Saint Michael casting Satan from heaven, and sighed. There were payments, she whispered. Small ones, at first. Always in cash. Donations, he called them. But I started keeping track, and then I saw where it was going. She opened her handbag and pulled out a flash drive. I copied everything. The files were meticulous. Not just financial logs, but scanned notes from Daniel's desk, correspondences between him and someone labeled only EM. The tone of the messages ranged from desperate to hostile. She's getting too close. I told you this would happen. Control it. Or I will. Allison and Mark stared at each other. Elias Monroe. He wasn't just a secret child. He was still in contact with Daniel. And possibly involved in Maria's murder. Finding Elias Monroe was no easy task. He didn't exist in any official records after 2014. But there was one lead, an anonymous donation made to a small rehab center in Maine. The name on the transaction? E.M. Holdings. It was a stretch, but Mark reached out. A few hours later, the call came in. The director of the facility confirmed that someone named Elias Monroe had stayed there in 2020 for 6 months. Withdrawn, quiet, always sketching. He told me once, the director said, that he was born in sin, raised in shadows, and would die in fire. I thought he was just being poetic. He left without saying goodbye. Meanwhile, Ashford had reached a fever pitch. The church attendance had plummeted. Families once bonded by faith now crossed the street to avoid one another. Lisa Carter, once beloved, now walked alone, her face shadowed by shame and grief. "They think I'm defending a murderer," she told Mark. "But they didn't know Maria like I did. She wasn't afraid of Daniel. She pitied him." Lisa then revealed something unexpected. The night before Maria died, she had called Lisa in tears, asking to meet. But Lisa had been away visiting her sister. "She said she had proof," Lisa whispered. "She didn't say of what. But she kept repeating, 'They'll kill me if they know I have it. They'll kill me if they know I have it.'" Using Amelia's flash drive and the church's old blueprints, Allison and Mark discovered something else, a sealed-off passage beneath the church's altar, once used as a wine cellar during the Prohibition era. It was now padlocked. They obtained a warrant and broke it open. The room was cold, its air thick with dust and mildew. There were old crates, empty wine bottles, and a newer box, wrapped in plastic. Inside it were burned documents, charred pages from what appeared to be Maria's second journal. Someone had tried to destroy it. But one page remained intact, half-scorched but readable. "The boy in the drawing. It's him. I saw him watching Daniel from the shadows." They spoke in Latin. I recognized a word, sanguinum. Blood. There were more drawings, Maria's, clearly, of a boy in a hooded sweatshirt, with hollow eyes and a scar down his cheek. Elias. Forensics confirmed it, the fingerprints on the knife and the cross were a partial match to a juvenile record from another state. A runaway with the name Elias Monroe had been arrested once for trespassing in a church, 5 years ago. The prints matched. Elias had been there. Possibly even the one who used the cross. But where was he now? Then came the break. A local innkeeper reported that a young man had been renting a room under a false name for the last 2 weeks. He paid in cash. Rarely spoke. But after seeing a news article about Maria's death and the police sketches, she recognized his face. Allison and Mark rushed to the inn. The room was empty. But inside was a sketchbook. The pages were filled with images of Maria, Father Daniel, and the church, burning, crumbling. One phrase repeated over and over in jagged ink. "Let the holy rot. Let the truth bloom." A final page showed something else, a drawing of Father Daniel standing over a small child, hand raised. The child's eyes were blacked out. There was no signature, only a word scratched beneath it. Benedictum. They found Father Daniel in the church sanctuary, sitting alone, staring at the crucifix. He didn't look surprised when Allison and Mark entered. "I knew it would come to this," he said softly. "He was my son. But not my salvation." "Where is he?" Allison asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. "He came here, to confront me. Said Maria was going to expose everything. I tried to stop him. But she wouldn't be silenced." He looked up. His eyes were hollow. "I didn't kill her. But I knew he would." Silence. Then. "I heard her scream. And I did nothing." 2 days later, Elias Monroe's body was found in the woods outside Ashford, an apparent suicide. A handwritten confession was found with him, confirming what Allison and Mark had suspected. He had come back to Ashford to confront the man who abandoned him, shamed his mother, and buried the truth. He found in Maria a kindred soul, but when she threatened to go public with what she knew, he snapped. "I didn't want to kill her," the letter said. But I couldn't let her ruin everything before he paid. She still called him father. I wanted her to see. To see who he really was. Father Daniel was arrested, not for murder, but for obstruction of justice, misappropriation of church funds, and conspiracy. His trial would take months. Ashford would never be the same. The church was closed indefinitely. The stained glass windows boarded up. Services were suspended. Some believed the building was cursed. Others thought it should be razed entirely. Lisa Carter quietly moved away. Amelia Ross resigned. The townspeople no longer gathered in cafes to gossip. Their whispers had become eulogies. Allison Harper stood one last time at the threshold of the church, staring at the cracked stone steps. "We solved it," Mark said beside her. But Allison didn't answer. She was staring at a single tulip growing from a crack in the pavement, bright red against the gray. Did we? 6 months after the trial, the town of Ashford remained suspended in a strange stillness. The leaves had begun to turn, and the crisp air of early autumn swept through empty church courtyards and silent community halls. Once a symbol of spiritual refuge, St. Mark's Church now stood shuttered, its doors chained, the windows dusty. A once vibrant Sunday choir had vanished like ghosts, their songs replaced by a silence that roared with everything left unsaid. Detective Allison Harper sat on the back porch of her modest home, her fingers tracing the rim of a coffee cup grown cold. Her thoughts wandered often now. She kept returning to Maria's smile, a photo from the file they'd used in court. That photo haunted her more than the crime scene. Because Maria had trusted Father Daniel. They all had. Across town, Mark Ridgeway had retreated from public view. He'd asked for desk duty for a time, citing burnout. His wife had noticed how much quieter he'd become, more attentive to their daughter, but also more distant, more inward. He still read every article John Miller published, still replayed the recorded confession of Stephen Fletcher late at night, trying to decipher what emotion, if any, lived in his voice when he said he killed Maria, by accident. But no one in Ashford truly believed it was an accident anymore. It was a rainy Tuesday when Lisa Carter, now living in a different state, returned to Ashford. She didn't tell anyone she was coming, just showed up at the edge of the cemetery holding a bouquet of daisies. Maria's grave was modest. A few neighbors had left tokens over the months, a church pin, a folded note, a small wooden cross. Lisa stood motionless, the water soaking through her coat, and whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I left." She hadn't planned on staying, but something pulled at her, an unfinished sense of responsibility. She walked into the Ashford Public Library, found the newest column by John Miller, and read it twice. His latest piece ended with a question. Was Father Daniel McKinnon the disease, or just the most visible symptom of something deeper? Lisa folded the article into her purse. She realized that the town had never really asked why Maria had known what she knew. Meanwhile, Allison, compelled by unresolved instinct, returned to the evidence archives. A particular thread gnawed at her, the second set of financial records they had found on Father Daniel's computer, encoded but never cracked. Now, with more time and fewer eyes watching, she ran them through new software. A breakthrough came fast and violent. The second ledger wasn't just about money, it was a list of names. People Father Daniel had paid off. One of them was Maria Grayson's younger brother, Eli Grayson, who had vanished from Ashford over a decade earlier after a scandal involving abuse allegations at a Catholic boarding school, allegations that had quietly disappeared. Allison's stomach turned. She pulled Mark back into the loop, and they met in the evidence room the next day. He paid off Eli, Allison said quietly, to disappear. And Maria, she found out. Mark's face paled. So she wasn't just killed to hide the financial fraud or the child. She was killed because she was going to expose something much worse. Systemic abuse, Allison confirmed. Covered up by the diocese. Daniel wasn't acting alone. Allison contacted Amelia Ross, the former church secretary. Amelia had gone silent after the trial but agreed to meet in a local diner. Her hands trembled as she lifted her teacup. "I didn't know the whole picture," she said. "But I knew Daniel was protecting something much larger. I thought it was about his child. But there were documents, locked in his office, names of donors, men from out of town. He kept files on them. Kept receipts. Blackmail?" Allison asked. "I think it started that way," Amelia replied. "But eventually, he was just another gear in a machine." Mark joined them an hour later, carrying copies of old diocese correspondence. One letter, addressed to Father Daniel from a Bishop Clarence Rowe, warned him in veiled terms to contain the risk posed by Maria Grayson's inquiry. The letter was dated 2 days before Maria's murder. The realization shook Allison and Mark harder than the original case. They weren't dealing with just a fallen priest, but a network of concealment that extended beyond Ashford. They could reopen the investigation, but this time, it wouldn't end at the prison cell of Daniel McKinnon. When they submitted the new evidence to the state prosecutor, the reaction was swift. A grand jury was convened. Subpoenas went out to the diocese. The name of Bishop Rowe hit headlines within days. As reporters descended upon Ashford once more, the town felt its scabs tear open. This time, the betrayal wasn't just personal. It was institutional. Though Daniel McKinnon was already serving life, he was brought into court again to testify. He looked thinner. Older. He refused to speak, invoking his right to silence. But one day, just once, he made a comment to Allison during a hallway recess. "You should be careful digging into graves," he said. "Sometimes, the dead aren't the only ones buried there." The investigation revealed 3 other victims tied to the same church network, 2 from neighboring towns, and 1 from within Ashford, who had never come forward until now. Eli Grayson's name surfaced again. He was found living under an alias in Texas. He agreed to testify, admitting that he had taken the money and disappeared, but not before telling Maria everything. She had forgiven him. That's what sealed her fate. The new trial resulted in multiple arrests, including Bishop Rowe, several former board members of the diocese, and at least one member of the Ashford City Council who had accepted bribes to keep complaints from reaching the press. A year later, St. Mark's was torn down. In its place, a memorial garden was planted, with a stone engraved with Maria's name, and beneath it, the names of others who had suffered in silence. Allison and Mark were both honored for their roles in exposing the deeper corruption. But the ceremony was somber, not triumphant. Lisa Carter moved back permanently, becoming a counselor for survivors of abuse. Amelia Ross, finally free of the guilt, began attending town halls again, no longer silent. John Miller's book, Ashes of Ashford, became a national bestseller. As for Allison and Mark, they continued to work, now assigned to a statewide task force handling clergy-related abuse cases. They didn't speak often about Maria anymore. But in every interrogation, every case file, her name lingered. Ashford would never be the same. But maybe, it was never what they thought it was to begin with. Maybe the true tragedy was that it took so long to see the truth, how darkness can flourish when cloaked in reverence, and how silence can be more violent than any scream. And maybe, just maybe, Maria Grayson's death was the moment when the silence finally broke.